fence line where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun. The sagebrush whispers, the rivers hum. This land's a story just begun. Wyoming calls where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. Boots hit gravel and the prairie sings. With every hoofbeat, the frontier rings. From ranchers' hands to miners' veins, the spirit of the West remains. Wyoming calls where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. So come ride with me through the dust and time. Find the soul of Wyoming beyond the fence line, beyond the fence line. Beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun.
Hey, 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 good morning, Wyoming. Hope you guys are doing well on this Tuesday, February 3rd. Wow. Here we are, a new month, in the month of February. Today, I am going to tackle immigration and ICE. So this has obviously been a hot topic nationally. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about Minnesota, that whole situation going on in Minnesota. Actually, I'm going to check my mic real quick here. Good. Okay, my mic is good to go. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about sensible immigration. We're going to talk about how we got here. We're going to talk about law and order and human dignity in context. We're going to talk about federal failure, my position on ICE. What is the path forward? What does it mean for Wyoming's future? And I'm also going to wrap this show up with a little bit of perspective and a reminder for my Christian brothers and sisters and what our faith dictates that we ought to do when it comes to the stranger and the foreigner among us, just as a way of a reminder. So it's going to be a fun show today. Probably going to be a full 30 minutes, which will be really great and a lot of fun. So let's talk about immigration. You know, this is not just a federal policy debate. It's a real world issue that affects our communities, our workers, our families, the families we have right here at home in Wyoming. Wyoming, I mean, we are a welcoming nation, right? Americans are some of the most generous people, if not the most generous people in the entire world. And these two sort of, I guess you could say truths, they don't compete with each other, but they should go alongside each other. And so I'm going to lay out an honest position outside the echo chamber and the noise of the right and the left. And we're going to talk about the differences there and the chaos and the fear that we're being fed by politicians on both sides of the aisle. And just maybe we can find a way forward and actually be something different. Our campaign slogan, as you know, is be something different. That's our campaign slogan. And so we're going to talk about immigration and ICE from something different. But before we dive in, let's talk about how we got here, guys. I think it's so important to understand that where we are today didn't just happen overnight. This didn't just happen during the Biden administration, you guys. This is the result of decades of failure where for the last several decades, we've deported tens of millions of people, all while not securing our borders. So basically, we're deporting these people and they're coming back. And we've got this kind of this revolving door for decades, right? Where our leaders and politicians are sort of just going through the motions without solving the problem. Shocking that government would do that, right? I feel like government does that in about everything. Where government pretends to do something, right? This happening all the time in Wyoming. This has happened at the federal level, where the federal government for decades has pretended to deal with immigration by deporting people without closing the border. And so this is not just, again, something that happened overnight, you guys. And I think we sort of try to, it's all Biden's fault, and it's blah, blah, blah. This is going on. We have created this issue, okay, you guys? This has been allowed to happen by our leaders in the federal government for a long time, beyond Biden, beyond Obama, beyond Bush, Clinton. I mean, this has been going on forever. Now, this has created issues, obviously, for us in our healthcare, our education, our criminal, and our welfare systems. The first step, for me, this has always been a multi-step process in solving this issue. And I'm grateful and I applaud the Trump administration for what I've always thought was step one. You've got to secure the border before you can deal with the immigration issue in the nation. And so I'm very grateful that we've done that. Border crossings last year and encounters last year were down to 25% of what they had been before. So that's an unbelievable success, right? That happened last year. And I'm thinking that number is going to be even lower this year. So we've done step one of sort of solving this immigration issue. Step two, we're already well into that law and order, right? Step two was this idea that then what we do is we begin to remove the criminals, those abusing our welfare system and our refugee systems, those committing fraud against Americans in health, education, criminal areas, and welfare. We want to begin to remove all of those people again. I applaud the Trump administration for now taking step two. Let's get rid of the folks that are harming our people the most. I think that's a great thing, that law and order thing. So we have to do that. In addition to that, allowing people to self-deport. And I think I saw the numbers most recently that about 2.5 million folks have self-deported. Now, those are going to be most of your folks, guys. Most of those folks, you guys, are going to be people who came here during the Biden administration and have somewhere to go home to, right? So they came here recently, either during the first Trump administration or the Biden administration. And when they came here, they have somewhere to go home to. So they've self-deported. So that's fabulous. We got 2.5 million people that self-deported and now potentially maybe have the opportunity to come here legally. I think that's great. So now we get into this law and order, but now there's this third piece. There's this third piece to me that has always been missed by politicians in the national narrative. So we have secure the border, crime, dealing with crime and law and order, right? Allowing people to self-deport in a humane and I guess you say in a way that is beneficial to humanity. But there's this last piece that I feel has always kind of been missing, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. And it's this human dignity piece of the immigration issue. Keep in mind what I started this out with is how we got here. And there are an awful lot of people here in this nation that call America home. They've known no other nation. They know no other language. They've gone to school here. Their friends are here. They're now in college. They've graduated college. They're working. They're doing all of these things. They're paying taxes. Yes, you guys, some of them are paying taxes. I know, shock, shock, shock. I know some people on the right don't want to hear that there are people here who are maybe perhaps aren't legal, but they're participating in our systems. They've been allowed to do that. And there's this human dignity issue that we need to talk about. So I'm going to repeat this. Step one, secure the border. Step two, let's start deporting. Let's start deporting a lot of people. Let's deport those criminals. Let's deport those people abusing our systems. Step three, where does human dignity come into this? Human dignity is not a political talking point. ICE exists for a reason. And we know that a nation without borders can't protect its citizens. But at the same time, we need to focus enforcement on intelligent and just, not just chaotic, politically weaponized systems, right, when it comes to immigration. Because human dignity matters. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a little while as it pertains, obviously, to me as a person of faith, but also just as importance of human dignity and how it plays into this immigration picture. But before I do that, I want to talk about the hotbed of this issue in Minnesota, because I think it's an important perspective of really what's going on in the entire nation. So let's talk about how we got to Minnesota and the truth about that from just a bird's eye view. Number one, we would not even be having this Minnesota discussion if an independent journalist, if Nick, that independent journalist, had not released his video in January exposing the fraud in welfare and stuff going on with the Somalis in Minnesota. Now, just so you know, according to U.S. law, if refugees are taking advantage of our welfare system and things like this, we can deport them completely without consequence, right? They get deported for abusing our systems, which is, of course, makes a lot of sense. But we wouldn't even be having this discussion if an independent video was not released. So this would cause me to ask the question, if that video had not been released, would our leaders in Washington still just be abiding by the status quo? And the answer is yes. Please remember that our current leadership in Washington also stopped DOGE last year. DOGE was getting close in April to all of this fraud. They were getting deep into the fraud in the U.S. government. And the current leadership in Washington put a stop to DOGE. They were not interested in solving this problem. Let's be honest. But because of that video, now what we have is a big, massive political theatrical operation to save face, to pretend like they actually cared about this issue. Because if you look at how almost all of our representatives voted in the last 2 weeks for what they were funding in these minibus bills that they passed, it would tell you that they did not really care about these issues of fraud going on in our nation until they got caught. And that's just the truth. And so now what we've seen in Minnesota is political theater coming from both sides. Now, I'm going to be very clear here. The sides are different, right? We approach things differently. But here's what happened. So Nick releases his video. People in Washington go, oh my gosh, we've got caught. We stopped Doge from finding this. Now we've got caught. We got to do political theater and save face. So what we did is we threw 15 to 20% of our ICE force into Minnesota at a 2% problem. So both sides have kind of escalated this. And I want to be clear where I stand on this, and I will be. These sides are different. But so here's what happened. This got exposed. We threw an overwhelming amount of force at this, right? This is what we did. Even though Minnesota actually only has about 2% of our immigration problem in the nation, we threw almost 1/5 or 20%, up to 20% of our actual force at this. Obviously creating an increase in escalation in that area. And then, of course, the other side throws in all of these protesters, right? Paid agitators, people who go, bust in, locals, everybody. And now we have this conflagration of law and order and an escalated situation from the right and an escalation situation from the left. By the way, they are different, right? We do approach it differently. I'm not going to deny that. But now we have this massive escalation in Minnesota. And of course, while we were all being distracted by Minnesota, Congress did a whole bunch of crazy stuff. I talked about that, by the way, last Wednesday in my show. If you want to hear that show, give me a shout out and I will share that show with you. Now let's talk about these two different sides in Minnesota, because I think it's important to do so. We are different. We are not the same. And I agree with that. When it comes to immigration, when it comes to all of the things that sort of ail our culture, I agree. We're not the same. But I want to talk about the protesting part of this piece in Minnesota against the immigration. See, we all have the right under the First Amendment of the Constitution, but you need to read this, for peaceful protests. It protects free speech, assembly, petition, guaranteeing the right to engage in a peaceful protest in a public area. So, you have the right to protest peacefully in a public space. This covers, demonstrations, marches, picketing. It allows reasonable, content-neutral regulations on time, place, and manner. What the First Amendment does not protect in the case of Minnesota is when you're violent, when you're rioting, when you're causing property damage, when you're blocking buildings. That's illegal and you should go to jail. And you should actually get punished for doing that. So you have this conflagration over immigration in Minnesota because of fraud that was exposed by an independent journalist. A discussion we wouldn't even be having if it wasn't for that independent journalist. Our leaders in Washington are not motivated to do this, but they have to now because of the video that got released. Our leaders in Washington have been, however, motivated to get rid of criminals, to get rid of people abusing our system, and doing that in a fair and a safe manner, in a balanced manner, and I believe that. But this is kind of what happened in Minnesota. So, an escalation, in my mind, created by both sides of the aisle, yes, in different ways. Yes, one side perhaps more legally and appropriately and rightly, and of course that would be the right side of things, and of course the left Totally fine, by the way, for the left to protest and to do that in a manner in which the Constitution protects. But this destruction of property, this violence, this rioting, this all this stuff, it's illegal. You can't do it. So that's kind of the summation that I have for Minnesota. Now let's talk about here in Wyoming. Recently, we saw in Wyoming a bunch of ICE activity, and we saw those protesters and those rioters show up, and they were blocking access to buildings. Those people need to be arrested and charged with crime, with obstruction of justice. They need to be. And I'm completely for that law and order. Now, had they been just peacefully protesting, doing what the Constitution protects, up at, I think it was Rock Springs where this was happening last week, you guys, and it's probably happening in other places too, I would have been fine with that. They're fine with that. That's their constitutional right. But the problem is they keep crossing these lines. And they need to be arrested. They need to be charged with crimes. But Wyoming should not have to be punished for federal failure. And I kind of broke that down earlier in the show today. And so our law enforcement agencies across the state have partnered with ICE to help with this issue, to help with detention, to help with proper and legal deportation. I think it's just so important. So where do I stand on ICE? ICE was created to enforce immigration law, to target criminal activity, to protect communities from trafficking, violence, exploitation, to protect us as American, tax-paying American citizens from people abusing our systems, our welfare, and things like that. So now we sort of get to this other part of what is the path forward, Joseph? And what is this human dignity thing that you talk about when it comes to immigration? So let's talk about the path forward. We've got a closed border. That's great. We know that creating mass chaos from either side of the aisle is not a great solution. The solution is that we bring order and responsibility and honesty to the process. Enforce our laws, fair, functional, legal immigration, clear expectations, and real consequences, by the way, for the people who obstruct and do things. But now let's talk about this human dignity part of the equation, this part where perhaps I bring in my faith a little bit more and kind of what this means for the future and what this looks like. This is the piece I feel like we've always missed as a culture at the federal level, in government, maybe even in government in Wyoming. And it's this piece that we enforce, deport. We finally closed our border. That's great. But what about the human dignity part of this? Remember that we allowed this, and I say collaboratively, that we allowed this problem, as I said in the beginning of the show today, to occur for decades. We allowed this. And during that time, here's my kids right here. That's Guinevere and Gemma and Samuel. During that time, we have potentially millions of people that came here or were brought here over the last several decades against their will, not within their own will and decision making. Most of them came in the form of children, right? And they've lived here, and this is home. Their friends are here, their communities are here. We've educated them here. They don't even speak any other languages. I think during the Obama administration, these people were called dreamers. And so I'm going to use that word, not because I necessarily agree with that approach, but I think it's an appropriate way to approach the issue. We have to give a compassionate human kindness, and some of you might go, oh, you're weak because you've got this human dignity aspect to your approach to immigration. No, I don't think that weakness, having human dignity and kindness, that's not weakness. Especially if you're a Christian, you understand that, and Christ exuded that. sort of thing when it came to human dignity and kindness. After we have completed or gotten, we are already a far way down this road of closed borders and enforced immigration and all of that. We need to start having the conversation about this human dignity piece, this piece for the people who have been here. I know a gentleman, by the way, he's here legally now, but he has been in Wyoming for 20 years. And yes, he originally came here illegally, but he's here legally now. So don't hear me wrong. He's here legally now. But this gentleman has been contributing to Wyoming for 20 years. He pays taxes. He has 4 businesses. He has a family. And he doesn't have a dignified, clear, easy path. I say easy path. Maybe it shouldn't be super easy, but he doesn't have a clear, dignified path to participate in our process, to become a citizen. Yet, he considers himself an American. Did he come here wrongly at first? Yes, no doubt. He's here rightly now. There are so many people like this, even these kids who were born here that have citizenship, that are potentially facing loss of their citizenship. We have to come up with this last phase of dealing with this immigration issue and give those who have never abused our systems, those who have never committed crimes, those who have integrated into our society, and they're not takers. In many cases, they are paying taxes. They're working, they're going to college, they're participants in our culture and society, and they know nothing else. We need to come up with a final solution for that last piece where these people can have a reasonable path to citizenship, to participation in America in a meaningful way. This does not dissuade. This should not encourage. This system should not be designed and or encourage additional illegal immigration, right? But we can create a framework which does not incentivize new illegal immigration, but deals with this human dignity aspect of this puzzle with immigration. So let me talk. I'm going to wrap this show up today with a perspective from my faith. And I know many of you that watch the show are Christians. And sometimes we fall astray because of the national narrative, what's going on in Minnesota, or what we hear on the news. We stray from what we're called to do as believers, as Christians. So I'm going to wrap this show up with this. Scripture is really, really clear about a couple of things, you guys. We're commanded to care for the foreigner among us while upholding order, justice, and responsibility. We are. So let's talk about this. New Testament, Old Testament, we see verses about this as we wrap up this show today. The Bible does not teach us chaos. So that's not something that we should be creating chaos. So we should do these things in the right way. It teaches compassion with structure. That's what the Bible teaches. I'm going to say that again. The Bible teaches compassion with structure when it comes to immigration. Leviticus 19:34 says, "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself." Exodus 22:21 says, "Do not mistreat or oppress the foreigner among you, for you were once a foreigner." I think that's a great thing for us to remember. I want to clarify that before I continue. This is talking about that human dignity piece that I was referring to earlier. This isn't talking about the chaos. This isn't talking about system abusers. This isn't talking about those folks who are here and causing harm to Americans. This is talking about those other folks that I was talking about, those foreigners among us that came here because we allowed them to over the last several decades. and they're participating and contributing to our culture and our society. That's what these verses are talking about. And at the same time, Scripture also affirms the role of law and order. Romans 13:1 says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities." Romans 13:3 says, "For the rulers hold no terror for those who do the right thing," right? "But for those who do wrong." So, in this idea, and of course, I think even Jesus talks about it too. These folks that are among us. So, in wrapping up where I stand on ICE and immigration, it is this: secure our border. We've done a great job. Start deporting or allow self deportation of all the people who are the system abusers, the criminals, the people who are not contributing to our culture and society. The large majority of these folks that came here in the last couple of years, especially during the Biden administration, etc., getting all of those folks deported. By the way, in my not necessarily for the criminals and things like that, but for the just the regular folks, doing that in a way that exudes some human kindness and some compassion, and getting them back where they belong. And then this third piece, dealing with this human dignity piece for the rest of those folks that I talked about in this show today, and what God says that we should do with those people and how we should address that. That third piece is something that we've never addressed in America, at least not to my knowledge, not in my lifetime. So those are kind of the three things that I want to say about immigration today. And ICE, hope you enjoyed the show today. I know this is a hot topic, and this is important to us. And I see that Dee made a comment, so I'll just respond to her real quick. We have to have human decency towards each other. I agree with that. And I think there's a right way to do that with immigration and dealing with those that are not here legally in a system that we have allowed to happen for decades. I think there's a right way to do that, Dee. I really do. And I know a lot of people may not agree with me, especially on maybe the right or the far right or the conservative side of that. But there is a human dignity piece to this. And I think we miss it a lot. But there's also truth to that law and order piece. And I think that that's being done well for the most part across the nation, except for in these places where we've perhaps, like I said, we've had this political theater and this the sort of escalation of things, which comes from both sides of the aisle, in my opinion, just in different ways. So let's have that human dignity piece when it comes to immigration. I think that's an important part of it. So with that, guys, hope you have a really super blessed day. I'm going to put a couple of links down below this thread for you guys. Like, if you guys want to do any of our campaign surveys, please feel free to share these campaign surveys with your friend. We have 3 surveys running right now, for the state of Wyoming, some things that might be interested, guys might be interested in doing or looking at. I think that's really, really great. And if you like what you've seen on this video, please share it. Please engage our campaign. So what's coming up the rest of the week? Well, tomorrow on Wednesday, I am going to talk about what's going on in the world and in U.S. news. I do that every Wednesday, and I give you my perspective on the issues and where I stand on the issues that we see. I feel like the headlines, we can hardly keep up with the headlines, right? Last week, I addressed the big betrayal from Congress and the bills that they passed. I encourage you guys to watch that. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit more, probably about economics, about gold, and about silver, about the Epstein file releases, and stuff like that. So that's tomorrow. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about agriculture, where I stand on agriculture in Wyoming. I'm going to talk about the number one existential threat to agriculture in Wyoming on Thursday. And by the way, probably not what you think it is. So watch the show on Thursday. Friday is probably going to be my favorite show. Friday is going to be the family show. I'm going to bring the family in. You're going to meet the whole family. We're going to tell some fun stories. I'm going to tell you my story, what brought me on this journey, how we got here. And so Friday's show is really, really going to be a lot of fun. Also, just so you guys know, the showtime has obviously changed. It's at 7:30 now instead of 6:30. But also, in addition to that, the show will replay in the evening at 7 o'clock. And I'll be watching, if any of you guys want to comment and engage me. But this will give people an opportunity in the evening to also see the morning show. And then, of course, all of the shows are recorded on the YouTube X channels, Rumble, and Facebook. So you can go back and watch a show too if you missed one. So with that, God bless you guys. You guys have a great show. I'm going to fire this show off. I think today I'm going to play the Code of the West. Have a wonderful, blessed Tuesday. And until next time, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Sun comes up on a small town road, coffee in a thermos, steel-toe boots. You don't flinch when the wind blows cold. You just do what you're born to do. Calloused hands on a busted gate. Fix what's broke till it holds its weight. You don't cut corners, don't fake the shine. You see it through every single time. That's the code of the West. Stand tall, give your very best. Your word is the mark on your chest. You ride for your people, you don't forget. Some things you just can't buy. A clean heart and a clear sky, know where to draw that line. That's the code of the West. That's the way I ride. You shake a hand that's an iron deal. Doesn't change with the way you feel. If you say you'll show, you'll be on time. Rain on the roof or a blue sky shine. You wear the name on your paycheck proud. Hold up the crew when the chips fall down. You don't brag big, you just get it done. Few words spoken, but you speak in tongues. That's the code of the West. Stand tall, give your very best. Your word is the mark on your chest. You ride for your people, you don't forget. Some things you just can't buy. Like a clean heart and a clear sky, know where to draw that line. That's the code